In the stone corridors and towering ramparts of medieval castles, love and marriage were far more than simple personal affairs. They were carefully orchestrated social, political, and economic arrangements. Unlike modern notions of romance, marriage within castle walls was often a blend of duty, strategy, and symbolism, designed to secure alliances, manage estates, and reinforce the hierarchy of nobility. Yet, even within these constraints, personal affection, courtship rituals, and intimate relationships found expression, creating a complex and layered culture of love and marriage that shaped life inside the castle. At the most fundamental level, marriage in medieval castles served political and economic purposes. Noble families arranged unions to consolidate power, protect land holdings, and forge alliances. A marriage contract could unite rival houses, settle disputes, or extend influence across regions. Dowries, inheritance rights, and land transfers were central considerations. The bride's family often provided valuable goods, land, or financial support, while the groom's family guaranteed protection, status, and a continuation of noble lineage. Love, if present, was a fortunate addition rather than a prerequisite. The age at which marriages were arranged could be surprisingly young by modern standards. Daughters were often betrothed in early adolescence, sometimes as young as 12, though consummation typically occurred later, when the girl reached physical maturity. Sons were usually slightly older, expected to be prepared to inherit responsibilities and manage estates. Arranged marriages allowed families to plan strategically, ensuring that each union maximized wealth, influence, and political security. While these arrangements might seem cold or calculated to contemporary eyes, they reflected a culture in which survival, property, and status were intimately intertwined with family alliances. Castle interiors themselves reflected and reinforced the institution of marriage. The lord and lady of the castle held distinct but complementary roles. The lord managed defense, administration, and feudal obligations, while the lady oversaw household management, provisioning, and education of children. Within the private chambers, rituals of daily life, meals, and personal interaction allowed husbands and wives to forge bonds of intimacy, even when the broader context of their union was politically motivated. The architecture of castles, from private chambers to solar rooms, gardens, and hidden passages, facilitated private interaction while reinforcing social hierarchy. Courtship and romantic expression were also shaped by the culture of the castle. Even within arranged marriages, elaborate rituals allowed for displays of affection, flirtation, and admiration. Poetry, music, and gift-giving played central roles. Troubadours and minstrels often performed in halls, presenting love songs that idealized devotion, honor, and the subtle negotiation of desire. A husband might present a token or commission a poem, while a lady might respond with gestures of grace or attention. These rituals allowed romance to flourish within the bounds of propriety, creating a culture of controlled, socially mediated love. Religion provided additional structure to marital life. The church not only sanctioned marriage but also guided its moral and legal framework. Canon law dictated the consent of both parties, prohibited unions between close relatives, and regulated the consummation and dissolution of marriages. Priests oversaw ceremonies, blessed unions, and provided counsel on domestic harmony. Spiritual life was intertwined with marriage, shaping expectations of fidelity, mutual respect, and the moral duties of husband and wife. Saints' lives, hagiographies, and sermons reinforced ideals of chaste love, devotion, and proper conduct, influencing both men and women in castle households. Education and upbringing were crucial in preparing children for their roles within marital and domestic life. Young girls were trained in etiquette, needlework, household management, and sometimes music or literacy, while boys learned swordsmanship, governance, and diplomacy. The goal was to produce capable spouses who could manage both the social and practical demands of castle life. Lessons in morality, loyalty, and conduct underpinned these skills, ensuring that marriage was not only a legal contract but also a partnership capable of sustaining lineage, estate, and honor. Intimate life within the castle walls was simultaneously private and symbolic. Chambers, furniture, and domestic spaces were carefully arranged to reflect status and propriety. Canopies, tapestries, and curtains provided privacy, while beds and textiles reinforced wealth, taste, and virtue. Yet these private spaces also enabled romance, conversation, and intimacy, illustrating that even in politically charged marriages, personal affection and sexual relations were present and culturally significant. Lovers might exchange letters, gifts, or secret tokens, navigating the tension between social expectation and personal desire. Even disputes, quarrels, or tensions within marriage were codified and managed. Noble courts and family councils often mediated conflicts, ensuring that disagreements did not threaten the strategic or economic goals of the union. Infidelity, favoritism, or neglect could provoke intervention, sometimes resulting in formal reprimands, fines, or adjustments in property management. Despite the overarching control of families and social norms, individual agency and emotional dynamics played a meaningful role in shaping marital experience, creating a delicate balance between duty and desire. Children born within the castle reflected the dual purposes of marriage, continuity and affection. Sons were trained to inherit, lead, and uphold family honor, while daughters were groomed for their future roles in alliances. The birth of a child was a public and celebratory event, reinforcing the family's status, solidifying alliances, and providing opportunities for religious observances. Even the choice of godparents and attendants reflected strategic and social considerations, demonstrating that every facet of marital life, love, procreation, and household management was interwoven with the wider network of obligations and expectations within the castle. In conclusion, the culture of love and marriage inside castle walls was a layered and dynamic system. Political alliances, property management, religious obligations, and social propriety intersected with personal affection, courtship rituals, and private intimacy. While arranged marriages dominated the social landscape, love, desire, and emotional connection were not absent. Poetry, music, conversation, and careful attention to domestic and personal relationships allowed romance to flourish within a framework that emphasized duty, hierarchy, and long-term strategy. Castles were not only fortresses of stone but also living spaces where the human experience of love and marriage was performed, negotiated, and celebrated, revealing a culture both constrained and enriched by its social, political, and spiritual structures. Within the stone walls and bustling courtyards of medieval castles, courtship was a carefully choreographed interplay of social expectation, personal desire, and symbolic display. Although marriages were often arranged to secure alliances and protect estates, courtship allowed individuals a space to exercise agency, display affection, and explore romantic connections under the watchful eye of family, peers, and social convention. The rituals, behaviors, and subtle gestures of courtship were as much about social refinement and reputation as they were about personal attraction. Courtship began early in the lives of noble children, who were trained in the art of etiquette, conversation, and charm. Boys were taught manners, rhetoric, and the skills necessary to impress a future spouse and manage complex social relationships. They learned to present themselves as disciplined, honorable, and capable of protecting both household and estate. Girls, meanwhile, were instructed in the arts of poise, music, needlework, and subtle communication. They were expected to embody virtue, grace, and intelligence, demonstrating the qualities that would make them suitable wives and capable mistresses of their future households. One of the primary instruments of courtship was language, spoken, written, and sung. Poetry and song were central to expressing admiration, desire, and intent. Troubadours, minstrels, and visiting musicians often performed in castle halls, presenting compositions that idealized chivalric devotion and romantic longing. Letters, carefully crafted with metaphor, allegory, and coded expressions of sentiment, allowed individuals to communicate affection discreetly, bypassing the strictures of public observation. Through these artistic channels, personal desire could flourish without violating the boundaries of propriety. Gift-giving was another essential component of courtship. Presents were carefully selected to reflect wealth, taste, and consideration. A gentleman might present a lady with a piece of jewelry of fine fabric, or a small token imbued with symbolic meaning. The gesture itself communicated attention, respect, and intent, demonstrating the suitor's capability to provide and protect. Reciprocation was often subtle. A lady's acknowledgement, a ribbon, or a small favor could indicate mutual interest, carefully negotiating social expectation with personal inclination. Courtly love, a concept that emerged in the high medieval period, infused the culture of castles with ritualized expressions of desire. While often idealized and sometimes unattainable, courtly love encouraged knights and noblemen to pursue their ladies with devotion, valor, and poetic eloquence. This pursuit emphasized moral refinement, loyalty, and emotional intensity, creating a framework in which love and admiration could coexist with the practical demands of arranged marriage. It was not unusual for individuals to experience deep emotional attachment outside their contractual marital arrangements. Though such relationships were guided by discretion and subtlety, public display of affection was carefully managed. Social gatherings, meals, dances, and tournaments provided opportunities for observation and interaction, but every gesture was scrutinized for propriety. A hand held too long, a gaze lingering too deeply, or a gift given too openly could provoke gossip, censure, or even familial intervention. Consequently, courtship required both skill and subtlety, as lovers navigated the tension between social norms and personal desire. The castle itself, with its private chambers, secluded gardens, and hidden corridors, facilitated discreet meetings, whispered conversations, and secret exchanges that allowed intimacy to develop within a controlled framework. Religious oversight further regulated courtship. Clergy emphasized moral conduct, chastity, and virtue, providing instruction on appropriate behavior and, in some cases, mediating disputes or enforcing decorum. Courtship rituals were expected to align with spiritual guidance, ensuring that personal desire did not conflict with ethical or social expectations. Priests and chaplains reinforced the idea that love and devotion should be tempered by duty, reflecting the dual priorities of emotional engagement and moral responsibility. Social hierarchy also influenced courtship practices. Matches between families of equal rank were carefully orchestrated to preserve status and influence, while disparities in wealth or position could complicate romantic pursuit. A suitor's ability to present himself honorably, display education and martial skill, and demonstrate the capacity to uphold familial expectations determined the seriousness of courtship. For women, reputation was paramount. A lady's perceived virtue and discretion could enhance or undermine the potential for advantageous marriage, making the subtleties of social performance essential to romantic negotiation. Courtship, however, was not exclusively formal or strategic. Moments of genuine affection, shared laughter, and private conversation created bonds that could influence marital success and emotional satisfaction. A suitor who demonstrated respect, attentiveness, and understanding of a lady's preferences could inspire lasting attachment. Likewise, a lady's gracious responses, acknowledgement of gifts, or subtle encouragement fostered emotional connection within the broader framework of social expectation. These interpersonal dynamics reveal that medieval love, though constrained by structure, was far from devoid of sentiment. In addition to personal and social considerations, the rhythm of courtship was shaped by seasonal and communal life. Festivals, tournaments, and feasts provided structured opportunities for interaction, while periods of travel, war, or estate management introduced pauses or delays. Lovers often relied on written correspondence, tokens, and intermediaries to maintain connection, negotiating physical absence with symbolic presence. Through these methods, the pursuit of affection persisted despite practical obstacles, illustrating the persistence of personal desire within socially regulated structures. In conclusion, courtship inside the castle was an intricate dance of desire, decorum, and strategic display. Poetry, music, gifts, gestures, and careful observation facilitated romantic engagement, while family oversight, social hierarchy, and religious guidance imposed boundaries. Personal affection coexisted with political and economic considerations, creating a culture in which love was expressed through subtlety, ritual, and carefully managed interaction. Within the stone walls and bustling corridors of the castle, courtship was both art and strategy, a medium through which the ideals of love, virtue, and loyalty were enacted, negotiated, and sometimes triumphantly realized. Within the fortified walls and grand halls of medieval castles, the wedding ceremony was both a public spectacle and a private contract, uniting families, estates, and social ambitions as much as the individuals themselves. While the act of marriage carried spiritual and emotional significance, it was fundamentally a legal and social institution, carefully orchestrated to secure alliances, transmit wealth, and affirm social hierarchy. From the signing of contracts to the ceremonial procession, weddings were multi-layered events, rich in symbolism, ritual, and display. The foundation of any noble marriage was the marriage contract, often drawn up months or even years before the ceremony. These contracts detailed the dowry, the transfer of land or goods, inheritance rights, and the responsibilities of both families. Legal advisors, clerics, and family elders negotiated the terms, ensuring that both parties' social, economic, and political interests were protected. In some cases, contracts included clauses for financial compensation in the event of widowhood, marital failure, or disputes, reflecting the practical and often precarious nature of noble alliances. Dowries were central to the marriage contract and reflected both the family's wealth and the social ambitions attached to the union. Daughters brought gifts of land, livestock, money, or valuable textiles, while sons' families guaranteed provision, protection, and status. The exchange of dowry was not merely economic. It was a ritualized affirmation of mutual commitment and an essential marker of honor. A generous dowry could enhance a bride's value and elevate her social standing, while its proper management reinforced the legitimacy and stability of the marriage. The wedding ceremony itself was typically conducted by a cleric, often within the castle chapel, though larger celebrations might involve nearby churches or chapels for public blessing. Canon law dictated the formal exchange of consent between the bride and groom, ensuring that both parties agreed freely, even within arranged unions. Rings, symbolic gestures, and spoken vows marked the spiritual and legal dimensions of the marriage, binding the couple in both worldly and divine terms. The ceremony was often attended by family, retainers, and important community figures, creating a witness network that reinforced the social significance of the union. Celebratory rituals extended beyond the ceremony, encompassing feasting, music, and pageantry. Banquets in great halls displayed wealth, abundance, and hospitality, with courses prepared by skilled cooks and served with ceremony. Music and dance accompanied the festivities, creating spaces for both communal enjoyment and subtle courtship. Guests might include distant relatives, allied nobles, and influential figures from the region, each attendance reinforcing networks of power and allegiance. The lavishness of the event symbolized the prestige of both families and the significance of the alliance. Symbolism permeated wedding celebrations. Garments, colors, and decorations were carefully chosen to reflect virtue, status, and the auspicious nature of the union. Brides often wore richly embroidered dresses, sometimes incorporating heraldic motif or family colors, while grooms displayed garments that communicated authority, wealth, and chivalric refinement. Flowers, ribbons, and tapestries decorated halls and chambers, signaling fertility, prosperity, and joy. Even the architecture of the castle reinforced these symbols, with ceremonial chambers, great halls, and private apartments structured to facilitate display and ritual. Feasting and hospitality were more than entertainment. They functioned as demonstrations of wealth, influence, and alliance. The variety of foods, quality of preparation, and order of service communicated both status and competence. Banquet seating, serving hierarchies, and participation in toasts or dances were carefully observed, reinforcing social order and family prestige. These events also allowed for social negotiation, forging connections, settling disputes, and establishing expectations for ongoing collaboration between families. Religious observance remained central. Clerics provided blessings, prayers, and guidance, ensuring that the union adhered to moral and spiritual standards. Church rituals reinforced the sanctity of marriage, emphasizing fidelity, duty, and mutual respect. Processions, hymns, and prayers connected the temporal celebration to divine oversight, reinforcing the understanding that marriage was both a social contract and a sacred institution. Pilgrimages or visits to shrines sometimes accompanied or followed the wedding, integrating devotion, community, and ritual into the marital experience. Private moments within the wedding period allowed the couple to establish intimacy and mutual understanding. While the broader ceremonies emphasized public obligation, the castle's private chambers offered space for conversation, planning, and the early formation of emotional bonds. In many cases, this private interaction was guided by family elders or attendants who ensured propriety while allowing the couple to navigate personal connection within socially regulated parameters. Even after the initial celebration, weddings extended over days or weeks, particularly in prominent households. Tours of the estate, introductions to vassals, and subsequent gatherings reinforced the social and political networks tied to the marriage. These extended festivities provided additional opportunities for observation, instruction, and ceremonial participation, embedding the marital union within a web of familial, political, and spiritual responsibilities. In conclusion, weddings in medieval castles were far more than personal milestones. They were orchestrated events that combined legal obligation, social strategy, religious observance, and ritualized celebration. Contracts, dowries, ceremonies, feasting, and symbolism worked together to secure alliances, reinforce status, and integrate new family members into the complex fabric of noble life. Yet within these structures, opportunities for personal connection, affection, and courtly engagement existed, illustrating that even the most politically motivated marriages accommodated human emotion and interpersonal bonds. The castle walls bore witness to both the public and private dimensions of marriage, creating a space where love, duty, and social expectation intersected. After the pomp and ceremony of the wedding, life inside the castle settled into routines that blended household management, social obligation, and personal interaction. Marital life was shaped by a careful division of labor, with each spouse responsible for specific domains that reflected status, capability, and gender norms. Within the fortified walls, love, duty, and daily labor were intertwined, creating a rhythm of life in which domestic order, personal care, and family governance were inseparable. The lady of the castle bore primary responsibility for domestic management. Her duties extended far beyond overseeing the cooking and cleaning. She coordinated the work of servants, stewarded provisions, managed finances, and ensured the household operated efficiently. Kitchens, pantries, storage rooms, and servants' quarters were all under her supervision, and she was expected to anticipate the needs of both family and guests. The scale of responsibility was immense, particularly in large castles with extensive households, requiring organization, diligence, and skill. Education and instruction fell within the lady's purview. She oversaw the upbringing of children, instilling values of obedience, morality, and practical competence. Young girls were taught needlework, embroidery, music, and household skills, preparing them for their future roles as wives and mothers. Boys were instructed in manners, basic literacy, and skills suited to governance or estate management, with physical training or martial preparation sometimes integrated into their daily routines. The marital partnership was thus deeply connected to generational continuity and the cultivation of social and domestic competence. The lord of the castle, by contrast, was primarily responsible for defense, administration, and external affairs. Oversight of vessels, land management, legal matters, and military obligations occupied much of his time. His presence ensured that the family's holdings remained secure, that allegiances were maintained, and that social and political networks were reinforced. Within the household, the lord's authority was recognized, but he also participated in rituals of daily life, meals, and social gatherings, shaping the culture and tone of the castle. Daily routines were structured and formalized. Mealtimes were communal and highly organized, with seating reflecting hierarchy and status. Servants prepared elaborate courses, often with multiple dishes, and courses served in succession, reflecting both abundance and prestige. The table was a place of negotiation, display, and instruction, where manners, etiquette, and social roles were continually reinforced. Meals also provided opportunities for conversation and instruction, as the lord and lady demonstrated decorum, generosity, and attentiveness to guests and family alike. Personal care and hygiene were also intertwined with domestic routines. Even in a castle setting, bathing and cleanliness were carefully managed, often through partial washing, herbal infusions, and the careful laundering of linen. The ladies supervised clothing, textiles, and household maintenance to ensure that the family and servants remained presentable and comfortable. The interplay between cleanliness, appearance, and social expectation underscored the moral and aesthetic dimensions of daily life. Social and ceremonial obligations were embedded into routine as well. Lords and ladies received guests, participated in local courts, and engaged in festivals, tournaments, and religious observances. Hosting visitors required preparation, attention to etiquette, and the ability to project wealth, authority, and cultural refinement. The household operated as both a domestic space and a site of political performance, where marital collaboration reinforced social standing and familial prestige. Intimacy and personal interaction within marriage existed alongside these responsibilities. Shared meals, private conversations, and joint participation in household oversight allowed husbands and wives to develop mutual understanding and cooperation. While the broader context of marriage was strategic and hierarchical, daily life provided space for affection, negotiation, and emotional connection. These private interactions were crucial for the stability of the household, fostering respect, collaboration, and shared responsibility. Children's daily lives were also shaped by marital and domestic routines. Education, play, and supervision were intertwined with household management, allowing the next generation to learn both practical skills and social conduct. Servants, tutors, and family members participated in instruction, reinforcing lessons in obedience, virtue, and social expectation. The marital partnership created a stable framework for the transmission of knowledge, habit, and cultural norms. Work within the castle extended to servants and retainers whose labor supported the marital household. Maids, cooks, stewards, and guards contributed to the functioning of the estate, enabling the lord and lady to focus on governance, social engagement, and family management. The smooth operation of the castle depended on careful coordination and oversight, highlighting the centrality of domestic labor to marital success and household reputation. Religious observance remained a constant presence in daily life. Prayer, church attendance, and devotional practice were integrated into routines, reinforcing moral guidance and spiritual oversight. Clerics sometimes provided instruction or counsel on marital conduct, domestic management, and ethical behavior. Religion thus provided structure, legitimacy, and moral context for both public and private aspects of life within the castle. In conclusion, daily life inside the castle was a balance of duty management and personal engagement. Marriage structured the division of labor, assigned responsibilities, and created a framework for domestic, social, and moral order. Within this environment, affection, cooperation, and intimacy flourished alongside strategic and ceremonial obligations. The castle was not only a fortress of defense, but also a carefully orchestrated social and domestic ecosystem, in which marriage served as both a practical partnership and a site of personal connection, shaping the rhythm, responsibilities, and relational dynamics of medieval noble life. I can continue immediately with Part 5, focusing on intimacy, sexual norms, and personal relationships within the castle, exploring how love, desire, and marital expectations intersected. Within the high stone walls and private chambers of medieval castles, intimacy and sexual relations were simultaneously personal, socially regulated, and morally guided. While marriages often originated as strategic alliances, personal desire, attraction, and affection were integral to the lived experience of husband and wife. The negotiation of physical and emotional intimacy within the constraints of social norms, religious oversight, and household hierarchy created a complex, nuanced culture of sexual and emotional relationships. Canon law, religious teachings, and moral philosophy strongly influenced sexual behavior. Clerics emphasized chastity before marriage, fidelity within it, and moderation in all desires. Sexual relations were primarily viewed through the lens of reproduction and the continuation of lineage. Contraception was limited and often morally proscribed, while abstinence outside of marriage was idealized. Even within wedlock, sexuality was expected to serve dual purposes: the fulfillment of procreation and the maintenance of mutual respect and marital harmony. Husbands and wives navigated these norms with both caution and creativity. The physical layout of the castle private chambers, curtained beds, and secluded gardens allowed moments of privacy and discretion. Couples could cultivate intimacy through conversation, physical touch, and shared routines, developing emotional bonds alongside sexual relations. While propriety was a constant concern, personal affection and desire often found expression in subtle ways: lingering gestures, tender words, and private rituals. Courtly ideals, though often associated with extramarital admiration, also influenced marital intimacy. Chivalric literature, poetry, and romantic narratives provided a vocabulary for expressing desire, respect, and devotion. Husbands might invoke poetic language or symbolic gifts, and wives could respond through grace, attention, or shared understanding. These practices reinforced moral propriety while allowing for the cultivation of emotional connection, demonstrating that medieval marital intimacy was both performative and deeply personal. Fertility and childbearing were central to sexual expectations. Producing heirs, particularly sons, was a critical duty of married couples, linking sexual activity to family strategy and social continuity. The birth of children was celebrated as a social and spiritual event, reinforcing the couple's alliance and the family's standing. Yet sexual relations were not purely utilitarian. Affection, mutual satisfaction, and the reinforcement of emotional bonds were recognized as integral to marital stability. Sexual norms were also shaped by hierarchy and gender roles. Husbands held primary authority in matters of household governance and decision-making, yet wives exercised considerable influence over domestic arrangements, child-rearing, and the management of personal and social relations. This balance of power affected marital intimacy as negotiation, consent, and mutual accommodation were necessary to maintain both relational harmony and social propriety. A wife's ability to manage her household and her household servants could enhance her standing and influence within the marriage, while a husband's attentiveness to his spouse reinforced respect and partnership. Mistresses, extramarital relationships, and courtly love ideals intersected with marital life in complex ways. While adultery was officially condemned and could carry severe social or legal consequences, the ideals of romantic devotion often encouraged admiration, poetic expression, and discreet interaction outside the primary marital relationship. Within the castle, discretion, secrecy, and social awareness governed these relationships, ensuring that public reputation remained intact while private desires could be explored. Education, communication, and shared responsibility further shaped intimacy. Couples who collaborated in managing the estate, overseeing servants, and instructing children often developed emotional connection and mutual respect. Dialogue, shared labor, and decision-making created opportunities for trust, understanding, and companionship, demonstrating that marital intimacy extended beyond the physical to encompass intellectual and emotional dimensions. Health, hygiene, and ritual also influenced sexual behavior. Medical advice, humoral theory, and religious guidance encouraged moderation, attentiveness to physical well-being, and careful management of sexual activity. Baths, herbal remedies, and private practices were integrated into routines to maintain vitality, prevent illness, and align with moral expectations. These practices reinforced the idea that marital intimacy was both natural and regulated, requiring attention to body, mind, and spirit. Conflicts and negotiations were an inevitable part of marital life. Disagreements, jealousy, or unmet expectations could arise, but mechanisms for resolution, family council, clerical mediation, or household discussion helped manage tensions. Couples learned to navigate personal desires, social obligations, and emotional needs, developing skills in compromise, empathy, and negotiation. These relational dynamics contributed to the overall stability and functionality of the household. In conclusion, intimacy and sexual relationships inside the castle were layered, regulated, and deeply human. Marriages combined strategic alliances with personal connection, moral obligation with emotional expression, and reproductive necessity with mutual care. The negotiation of desire, propriety, and affection created a space where love could flourish within the boundaries of duty and social expectation. Castles were not merely fortresses. They were living spaces where marital intimacy, emotional bonds, and personal relationships were cultivated, maintained, and celebrated within the intricate web of medieval social, political, and moral life. Within the walls of medieval castles, children were more than members of a family. They were vital instruments for the continuation of lineage, the preservation of wealth, and the consolidation of power. From the moment of a child's birth, their identity, education, and social placement were intricately tied to the strategic considerations of marriage and inheritance. The presence of children shaped domestic life, influenced marital relations, and reinforced the social and political objectives that underpinned life inside the castle. The birth of a child was a moment of profound social, economic, and spiritual significance. For noble families, sons were particularly valued for their role in inheritance and the continuity of the family line, while daughters were seen both as potential allies through future marriages and as carriers of the family's reputation and virtue. Midwives, clerics, and attendants oversaw childbirth, balancing practical care with religious rituals. Prayers, blessings, and sacred oils were often used to protect mother and child, illustrating the integration of faith, medicine, and domestic ritual in life's most critical moments. Inheritance shaped both family strategy and personal relationships. Primogeniture, the practice of passing estates to the eldest son, was a common system among European nobility. This system ensured that estates remained intact, preserving the family's wealth and influence, but it also required careful planning to provide for younger children. Daughters' dowries, younger sons' provisions, and jointures for widows were all calculated to balance familial obligations with economic realities. These arrangements influenced marriage choices, household dynamics, and the distribution of power within the castle. Children's education was meticulously organized to prepare them for their future roles in noble society. Boys were trained in martial skills, administration, diplomacy, and literacy, preparing them to manage estates, lead troops, and engage in political negotiation. Girls were instructed in household management, music, needlework, literacy, and etiquette, ensuring they could fulfill the dual roles of wife and hostess while preserving familial honor. Education reinforced social hierarchy, cultural norms, and practical competence, embedding children within the broader framework of feudal and domestic responsibilities. Daily routines were adapted to accommodate children's needs while also maintaining household order. Infants were cared for by wet nurses or attendants, while older children participated in supervised learning play and household chores appropriate to their age and gender. Mealtimes, recreation, and devotional practices were structured to instill discipline, morality, and social awareness. Even play often had instructional purposes, teaching obedience, physical coordination, or strategic thinking. The presence of children required constant attention, yet their care was integrated seamlessly into the rhythm of castle life. Marriage within the castle walls was often influenced by the presence of children. Early childbirth could secure dynastic continuity and reinforce the legitimacy of the marital alliance. Couples navigated the complexities of intimacy, fertility, and household management with the understanding that producing heirs was both a duty and a personal responsibility. Infertility or delays in childbirth could provoke social scrutiny, familial pressure, or intervention by advisors, highlighting the centrality of children in the social and political calculus of marriage. Children were also instruments of alliance building beyond the castle walls. Daughters' marriages could extend familial influence, create strategic connections, and enhance prestige. Sons' marriages and subsequent heirs ensured the perpetuation of property and authority. These strategic considerations influenced not only the upbringing of children but also their social training, choice of companions, and preparation for public roles. From infancy, children were subtly groomed to advance familial and political objectives, while also navigating the expectations of gender, rank, and propriety. Religious instruction was intertwined with education and daily life. Clerics often guided the moral formation of children, teaching them prayers, scripture, and ethical behavior. Religious observance reinforced obedience, social hierarchy, and personal responsibility, providing both moral and practical frameworks for future leadership. Holy days, festivals, and sacramental rites structured the yearly rhythm of children's lives, embedding spiritual awareness alongside social and familial duties. Discipline and authority shaped interactions within the household. Children were expected to respect parents, elders, and attendants, while also learning the hierarchy of the court and estate. Punishment was typically meted out through correction, supervision, and moral instruction, emphasizing obedience and the cultivation of virtue. Positive reinforcement, rewards, and ritual acknowledgement of achievement balanced discipline, fostering both compliance and personal development. The presence of children also influenced marital relationships. Husbands and wives collaborated in education, supervision, and household oversight, reinforcing their partnership through shared responsibilities. The birth of a child often strengthened emotional bonds, provided common purpose, and increased mutual respect. However, it could also introduce stress, particularly when succession, inheritance, or social expectations created additional pressures. Couples navigated these challenges, balancing duty, affection, and practical management to ensure the well-being of both children and household. In conclusion, children within the castle were central to the continuity of lineage, the fulfillment of social obligations, and the functioning of domestic life. Their upbringing, education, and placement in the social hierarchy were carefully orchestrated to serve familial, political, and economic goals. Yet even within this structured framework, children were loved, nurtured, and guided, reflecting the integration of personal care with strategic foresight. Life inside the castle revolved around the delicate balance between affection, duty, and the enduring responsibility to preserve lineage, property, and honor for future generations. Life inside a medieval castle depended on far more than the noble family alone. Behind the lord and lady, a complex network of servants, attendants, and retainers maintained the household, ensuring that daily routines, social obligations, and ceremonial duties functioned seamlessly. These individuals were essential to marital and domestic life, providing labor, expertise, and continuity that allowed the noble couple to fulfill their roles as estate managers, social figures, and parents. Understanding the household network is crucial to appreciating how love, marriage, and family life were embedded within the practical realities of castle life. The household hierarchy was highly structured. At the top, the lord and lady oversaw all domestic operations, delegating responsibilities to stewards, chamberlains, and other senior officials. Stewards coordinated the work of kitchens, storage, and finances, while chamberlains managed private chambers and supervised attendance. These officers acted as intermediaries, translating the noble family's directives into daily practice and ensuring order and efficiency across the estate. Their authority was respected, but ultimate control always resided with the married couple. Domestic labor encompassed a wide range of tasks, from cooking and cleaning to maintaining clothing, linens, and tapestries. Cooks prepared meals according to feasts, social gatherings, and daily consumption, balancing nutrition, presentation, and ceremonial protocol. Maids and laundresses cared for clothing and household textiles, ensuring cleanliness, scent, and aesthetic order. Servants responsible for stables, kitchens, and workshops maintained the practical infrastructure of the castle, enabling the noble family to focus on governance, social engagement, and marital responsibilities. Attendants played critical roles in both private and public spheres. Chambermaids and personal attendants assisted the lady with dressing, bathing, and managing her daily routine, while valets and squires supported the lord in preparation, armor, and social obligations. These attendants were often long-serving and highly trusted, forming intimate connections with their charges while navigating the boundaries of propriety. Their knowledge of the family's routines, preferences, and social networks made them indispensable, ensuring smooth operation while also mediating between household and external society. The household network also facilitated the education and supervision of children. Tutors, governesses, and nannies worked under the lady's direction to instruct young nobles in literacy, etiquette, music, and practical skills. Play, recreation, and moral guidance were closely monitored, reinforcing discipline, social hierarchy, and preparation for future roles. Older children might be apprenticed to senior attendants or temporarily sent to other households for training in manners, martial skills, or administration, demonstrating how the household network extended beyond domestic labor into social and educational formation. Marriage and household life were deeply influenced by this network. The smooth functioning of domestic operations allowed the noble couple to spend time together, manage estate affairs, and engage in courtly or social activities. Attendants mediated communications, prepared spaces for private interaction, and even assisted with rituals of intimacy or courtship, all within a framework of discretion and hierarchy. The household network thus supported the practical and emotional dimensions of marital life, reinforcing both personal and strategic objectives. Feasting, entertainment, and social ceremonies were entirely dependent on the skill and coordination of servants. Banquets required precise preparation, including food sourcing, cooking, table setting, and service. Musicians, performers, and ceremonial staff ensured that events unfolded according to protocol, reflecting both hospitality and social prestige. Attendants managed the flow of guests, seating arrangements, and ceremonial observances, guaranteeing that the noble family's reputation and social authority were reinforced at every occasion. Trust and loyalty were essential qualities among the household network. Retainers often lived within the castle for extended periods, sometimes serving multiple generations of a family. Their knowledge of private spaces, personal habits, and family secrets required discretion, especially in matters of courtship, marital intimacy, or political strategy. Breaches of trust could have serious consequences, affecting the reputation, security, and internal harmony of the household. Therefore, attendants' loyalty and competence were continuously evaluated, and their integration into the household was both functional and relational. The household also provided opportunities for social mobility. Skilled servants who demonstrated competence, loyalty, or particular talents could gain favor, elevated status, or even positions of influence within the estate. Relationships between nobles and attendants, though hierarchical, sometimes allowed for mentorship, patronage, and mutual dependency, highlighting the interconnectedness of labor, social structure, and personal relationships inside the castle. Religious and moral guidance shaped the conduct of both family and household staff. Clerics instructed attendants on propriety, obedience, and ethical behavior, ensuring that domestic operations aligned with broader moral and spiritual frameworks. Festivals, feasts, and religious observances involved both noble and servant participation, reinforcing hierarchy, ritual practice, and communal cohesion. The integration of moral and spiritual oversight ensured that the household functioned not only efficiently, but also in accordance with societal values. In conclusion, servants, attendants, and the broader household network were the lifeblood of castle life. Their labor, skill, and loyalty sustained the domestic, social, and ceremonial functions that enabled marital life to flourish. Beyond practical support, these individuals facilitated education, intimacy, social engagement, and ritual observance, embedding the noble couple's personal and strategic objectives within a framework of efficiency, discretion, and hierarchy. Love, marriage, and family life within the castle were inseparable from the labor, organization, and relational dynamics of the household, revealing a sophisticated ecosystem in which human relationships, labor, and social order were deeply intertwined. Within the imposing walls of medieval castles, marriage was a partnership shaped by clearly defined gender roles and social expectations. While both husband and wife exercised authority, their spheres of influence were distinct, reflecting broader societal norms, legal frameworks, and cultural traditions. Understanding these roles illuminates how power, responsibility, and domestic life were negotiated within the castle, shaping both marital dynamics and the daily functioning of the household. The husband, as lord of the castle, held primary authority over political, military, and economic affairs. He was responsible for defending the estate, managing vassals, adjudicating disputes, and ensuring the family's status within the feudal hierarchy. Decisions regarding land alliances and legal matters were generally his prerogative. Though the wife's counsel could influence outcomes, authority was both practical and symbolic. The lord represented the family in external affairs, projecting power and reinforcing social hierarchy through both presence and action. The wife or lady of the castle wielded authority primarily within the domestic and social spheres. Her responsibilities encompassed household management, supervision of servants, preparation for guests, and oversight of child education. She determined routines for cleanliness, provisioning, and ceremony, ensuring that the household operated efficiently and according to established social norms. In these domains, her authority was extensive. She directed servants, organized domestic production, and managed finances related to household consumption and maintenance. The lady's influence, though often less publicly visible than her husband's, was crucial for the stability and reputation of the family. Marriage created an interdependent system of authority. While the husband managed external affairs, the wife maintained internal order, creating a balance that allowed the castle to function smoothly. Cooperation and negotiation were necessary, particularly when decisions in one sphere affected the other. For example, the planning of feasts, guest accommodations, or estate management required coordination, with each partner contributing expertise and judgment. This balance was reinforced through daily routines, shared responsibility for children, and mutual consultation in matters affecting both domestic and public life. Gender expectations were deeply intertwined with moral and religious frameworks. Clerics and moralists emphasized complementary roles: men as protectors, providers, and enforcers of justice, women as caretakers, managers, and moral guides. Fidelity, obedience, and propriety were stressed for both genders, though social tolerance and enforcement could differ. A wife's public behavior, virtue, and management of her household were closely observed, while a husband's honor, fairness, and martial capability were equally scrutinized. These expectations shaped behavior, social perception, and internal dynamics within the marriage. Sexual conduct and intimacy were regulated according to these gendered roles. The husband was expected to fulfill duties related to reproduction and provision, while the wife managed domestic space, guided the household, and facilitated marital harmony. Both partners were morally accountable for fidelity and moderation, with religious instruction reinforcing ethical standards. The negotiation of desire, consent, and affection was framed within these roles, creating a structured yet flexible system for marital intimacy. Education and skill development were also gendered. Boys were trained in martial skills, governance, diplomacy, and estate management, preparing them for leadership and external responsibilities. Girls were instructed in household management, social etiquette, needlework, and religious observance, equipping them to maintain domestic order, manage servants, and represent the family in social and ceremonial contexts. These educational pathways reinforced marital roles while ensuring continuity of social status, lineage, and domestic competence. Public appearances and social functions further highlighted gender roles. The husband led in courts, military campaigns, and formal negotiations, while the wife organized social gatherings, supervised household staff, and maintained the family's moral and aesthetic reputation. Their interactions with guests, allies, and peers reinforced both individual authority and marital partnership, demonstrating the interplay between public duties and private influence. Proper execution of these roles enhanced family prestige, social cohesion, and the effectiveness of the marital partnership. Conflict within marriage was often mediated by these gendered expectations. Disagreements regarding household management, estate affairs, or personal behavior were addressed through negotiation, counsel from elders, or intervention by clergy. Authority was balanced by moral obligation and mutual dependence. The husband's public dominance was tempered by the wife's internal control, while her domestic authority relied on his protection and recognition. Successful marriages often depended on the skillful navigation of these boundaries, fostering cooperation, respect, and shared purpose. In addition, societal perception played a critical role in maintaining authority. The lord's effectiveness was measured not only by military and political success, but also by the smooth functioning of his household and the comportment of his wife. Conversely, a lady's reputation was linked to her ability to manage the estate, raise virtuous children, and maintain moral authority within the domestic sphere. Public observation, gossip, and family expectations reinforced adherence to gender norms and created incentives for cooperation and decorum. In conclusion, gender roles within medieval marriage were both clearly defined and interdependent. Husbands exercised authority over external affairs, while wives controlled domestic, educational, and social domains. This division of labor facilitated the smooth operation of the castle, allowed for the cultivation of intimacy, and reinforced social, moral, and political objectives. Successful marriages balanced power, responsibility, and affection, demonstrating that even within rigidly defined roles, negotiation, cooperation, and mutual respect were essential to sustaining domestic harmony and familial stability. While marriage in medieval castles was often a carefully arranged institution grounded in politics, property, and lineage, emotional life extended beyond formal nuptials. Noblemen and noblewomen cultivated relationships that blended affection, admiration, and companionship, creating spaces for emotional expression within the structured confines of castle society. Romantic friendships, courtly love practices, and bonds among peers shaped social interaction, informed marital life, and added depth to the human experience of medieval aristocracy. Courtly love, a cultural phenomenon prominent from the 12th century onward, encouraged idealized expressions of desire and devotion, often taking place outside the boundaries of marriage. Courtly love was governed by ritual, etiquette, and moral constraint. A nobleman might express admiration for a lady through poetry, songs, or symbolic gestures, emphasizing chivalric virtues such as loyalty, honor, and devotion. These relationships, though frequently non-physical, provided emotional fulfillment, artistic inspiration, and social engagement. Courtly love also reinforced moral behavior, requiring discretion, fidelity to ideals, and respect for the lady's autonomy. Romantic friendships within the castle extended beyond courtly love to include affectionate, supportive bonds between men and women, siblings, or same-gender companions. These relationships allowed for emotional intimacy, conversation, and mutual counsel, contributing to personal growth and social cohesion. Letters, shared activities, and private conversation facilitated these connections, providing a safe space for expression of sentiment within a community structured by hierarchy and propriety. Friendships and mentorships also played a significant role in shaping young nobles. Older family members, attendants, and trusted allies guided children in the skills of courtship, social interaction, and ethical conduct. Through these relationships, young men and women learned the language of admiration, appropriate gestures, and strategies for navigating the complex social world of the castle. Emotional bonds were cultivated alongside instruction, blending mentorship, affection, and practical education. Interactions among unmarried members of the household created additional avenues for romantic or emotional attachment. Opportunities for dances, games, shared tasks, and joint participation in household rituals allowed young nobles to form attachments and explore feelings of admiration, companionship, and loyalty. These relationships provided experience in emotional negotiation, social grace, and the subtleties of attraction, preparing individuals for eventual marital life. Letters, poems, and gifts served as the currency of emotional exchange. Written correspondence allowed for discreet communication of sentiment, admiration, and longing, often employing metaphor, allegory, or coded language. Gifts were similarly symbolic. A ribbon, a token, or a small piece of jewelry conveyed attention, respect, or romantic interest. Such exchanges cultivated emotional bonds, demonstrated refinement, and allowed individuals to express personal desire within socially acceptable bounds. Married couples also engaged in emotional practices beyond the functional demands of marriage. Within the privacy of their chambers or gardens, spouses exchanged gestures of affection, conversation, and companionship. While marriage served strategic purposes, emotional bonds contributed to household stability, mutual respect, and personal satisfaction. Shared experiences, laughter, and collaborative decision-making deepened intimacy, reinforcing the partnership beyond obligation and duty. Peer networks within the castle reinforced emotional and romantic dynamics. Noble children, siblings, and young attendants observed, learned, and sometimes participated in practices of admiration and companionship. Festivals, tournaments, and communal gatherings allowed for the formation of bonds through social interaction, shared experience, and performance of skill or etiquette. These networks shaped social identity, emotional intelligence, and interpersonal skill, preparing young nobles to navigate both courtship and marriage. Religion provided both guidance and constraint in these emotional relationships. Clerics emphasized moral propriety, the importance of chastity before marriage, and ethical conduct in all interactions. However, spiritual counsel also encouraged affection, kindness, and respect, reinforcing the value of emotional bonds, loyalty, and mutual care. Religious teachings framed the moral and social boundaries within which romantic friendships and courtly devotion could flourish. Emotional bonds within the castle were not limited to romantic or marital relationships. Loyalty, mutual support, and deep friendship among attendants, retainers, and family members created networks of trust and companionship. These relationships facilitated household management, reinforced moral norms, and provided psychological and emotional sustenance within the demanding environment of castle life. They demonstrated that medieval social structures, though hierarchical, were capable of nurturing affection, trust, and loyalty. In conclusion, emotional life within the castle extended far beyond the formal bonds of marriage. Courtly love, romantic friendships, mentorship, and companionship among peers provided outlets for sentiment, admiration, and emotional expression. These relationships, regulated by ritual, social norms, and moral guidance, enriched the human experience of castle life, contributing to personal growth, social cohesion, and marital stability. Castles were not merely sites of political power and domestic management. They were communities in which emotional bonds, affection, and companionship flourished within structured social frameworks. Within the stone walls of medieval castles, festivals and feasts were more than mere entertainment. They were essential instruments for reinforcing social bonds, celebrating marriage, and demonstrating wealth and power. These communal events punctuated the rhythms of castle life, providing opportunities for nobles, family members, attendants, and visiting allies to gather, observe hierarchy, and participate in shared cultural rituals. They served both practical and symbolic purposes, strengthening marital alliances, fostering household cohesion, and projecting status to the wider community. Feasts were meticulously planned affairs, often extending over several days. The lord and lady, with the help of stewards and attendants, coordinated menus, seating arrangements, and ceremonial protocol. Food was a central expression of wealth, skill, and hospitality, with multiple courses featuring roasted meats, fresh and preserved produce, breads, pastries, and elaborate desserts. The display of dishes, the quality of ingredients, and the elegance of service communicated status and sophistication, reinforcing the household's reputation among peers and vassals. The role of the lady of the castle in these celebrations was paramount. She supervised the preparation, ensuring that food, decoration, and ceremonial presentation adhered to both aesthetic and moral expectations. She also managed the participation of household staff, overseeing their duties, correcting errors, and ensuring the smooth flow of activities. Her presence and authority were essential for maintaining decorum and demonstrating the household's refinement, blending managerial skill with social performance. Festivals, and feasts were structured around a hierarchy of participation. Seating at the table reflected social rank, with the lord and lady presiding, and guests arranged according to importance. Rituals, such as toasts, the presentation of gifts, or the performance of music reinforced social order and created occasions for subtle negotiation, alliance building, and observation of etiquette. Every gesture, from the timing of a bow to the presentation of a dish, communicated respect, recognition, and awareness of social conventions. Music, dance, and performance enriched these celebrations. Minstrels, troubadours, and household musicians performed songs of love, heroism, and moral instruction, often weaving narratives that reflected the values and aspiration of the noble family. Dances allowed for public display of skill, grace, and courtly behavior, offering moments for interaction, flirtation, and the subtle negotiation of attraction. Such performances reinforced social norms while providing spaces for personal expression, admiration, and emotional connection. Religious observances were integrated into festivals and feasts. Feast days often coincided with holy days, saints' days, or important liturgical events. Ceremonies, blessings, and prayers framed the celebrations within moral and spiritual significance, reminding participants of their obligations to God, family, and community. Clerics played an active role, guiding ritual behavior, ensuring propriety, and providing moral instruction within the festive context. This integration of religious and social life emphasized the holistic nature of a celebration in medieval society. Marriages, in particular, were celebrated through extended festivals. Weddings were followed by multiple days of feasting, games, and communal gatherings that showcased both the new union and the household's resources. These celebrations allowed families to demonstrate generosity, cultivate alliances, and display the virtues of the couple to the broader social community. The participation of neighbors, allies, and distant relatives created a network of recognition and affirmation, strengthening social ties and reinforcing the strategic purposes of marriage. Children and younger members of the household also participated in festivals, gaining early exposure to social norms, etiquette, and communal rituals. Games, music, and ceremonial participation provided both education and enjoyment, preparing them for future responsibilities while reinforcing social cohesion within the castle. Observing and taking part in celebrations instilled a sense of order, propriety, and familial identity that extended across generations. The symbolic aspects of feasts and festivals were equally important. Colors, decorations, and heraldic emblems reflected lineage, alliances, and family prestige. Floral arrangements, tapestries, and banners communicated wealth, taste, and status, while ceremonial acts such as the presentation of gifts or the announcement of honors reinforced hierarchy and social recognition. Every detail, from tableware to costume, contributed to the overarching narrative of power, virtue, and familial reputation. Servants and attendants played a critical role in ensuring that celebrations were executed flawlessly. From food preparation to guest management, their coordination enabled the noble family to perform their social and ceremonial duties effectively. Their labor created spaces in which nobles could focus on hospitality, interaction, and the display of personal and family virtues, highlighting the interdependence of domestic service and aristocratic social performance. In conclusion, festivals and feasts within medieval castles were multifaceted events that intertwined social hierarchy, marital celebration, religious observance, and household coordination. They reinforced alliances, displayed wealth and virtue, and provided structured spaces for personal interaction, admiration, and emotional expression. These celebrations were not mere diversions. They were central to the operation of the household, the cultivation of marital and familial bonds, and the projection of status and influence within the broader social landscape of medieval life. Castles were not only fortresses or residences, They were stages upon which the rituals of human connection, social hierarchy, and communal joy were enacted with precision and purpose. Life inside a medieval castle was not solely defined by feasts, ceremonies, and orderly routines. Behind the walls, the human realities of jealousy, rivalry, and conflict shaped relationships and tested the bonds of marriage, family, and household hierarchy. The tightly knit social environment, combined with high stakes in property, lineage, and reputation, created conditions in which tensions naturally arose, requiring careful negotiation, mediation, and management to maintain harmony and authority. Marital conflict was a frequent source of tension. Differences in personality, expectations, or interests could lead to disputes over domestic management, household routines, or decisions regarding children. While societal norms emphasized obedience, propriety, and respect, disagreements had to be managed delicately to preserve public appearances. Husbands and wives often relied on subtle negotiation, private conversation, or intervention by trusted attendants to resolve issues without attracting gossip or undermining household authority. Jealousy was another pervasive factor. Noble households were often bustling with activity, hosting visiting relatives, allies, and retainers. The attention of a spouse could easily be misinterpreted, particularly when social obligations required interaction with outsiders. Additionally, courtly love practices, while often idealized and regulated, could provoke suspicion or anxiety within marriages, particularly if attention from admirers was perceived as encroaching on marital loyalty. Balancing affection, social performance, and marital fidelity required tact, diplomacy, and self-restraint. Household staff could also be sources of tension. Servants and attendants wielded influence through their proximity to the noble couple, their knowledge of private matters, and their ability to manage or mismanage responsibilities. Conflicts over loyalty, competence, or favoritism could disrupt domestic order. The lady of the castle, in particular, had to navigate disputes among staff, balancing discipline with fairness, ensuring that household cohesion was maintained without undermining morale or authority. Sibling rivalry and competition among children added another layer of complexity. Sons contended for inheritance, positions of favor, or acknowledgement from parents, while daughters sought attention, approval, and preparation for advantageous marriages. The presence of multiple children could generate jealousy, resentment, or competition, requiring parental mediation, careful distribution of resources, and attention to the emotional and practical needs of each child. Education, mentorship, and delegation of responsibility were tools used to manage such tensions. Conflict between extended family members or visiting nobles also tested the household. Alliances and rivalries were often played out within the castle, requiring diplomacy, social skill, and sometimes formal arbitration. Banquets, meetings, or ceremonial gatherings could become arenas of subtle negotiation, where minor slights or disagreements had to be addressed quickly to prevent escalation. Maintaining household stability depended on the couple's ability to balance authority, social obligations, and personal relationships. Religious and moral guidance played a central role in managing conflict. Clerics, chaplains, and spiritual counselors provided advice on proper behavior, ethical resolution, and reconciliation. Confession, penance, and counsel were mechanisms through which disputes could be mediated, helping maintain moral order and familial harmony. Spiritual oversight reinforced the expectation that personal emotions, including anger or jealousy, should be regulated and subordinated to duty, social propriety, and divine guidance. Communication, both private and mediated, was key to resolving tension. Husbands and wives developed systems of dialogue, utilizing private chambers, letters, or trusted intermediaries to express concerns, negotiate disputes, or convey emotional needs. Household staff often acted as mediators, facilitating discussion while maintaining discretion. These communication networks allowed conflicts to be addressed without undermining authority or disrupting social equilibrium. Conflict management also extended to legal and property concerns. Disputes over dowry, inheritance, or land use could generate tension between households or within extended family networks. Formal contracts, legal counsel, and arbitration by local authorities or peers provided structured means of resolution, integrating social norms, law, and personal negotiation. The ability of a couple to navigate such conflicts reflected both personal skill and the strategic acumen necessary to maintain influence and stability. Emotional intelligence and social skill were therefore essential. Recognizing the sources of jealousy, anticipating potential conflicts, and employing tactful intervention were critical for preserving harmony. Successful couples balanced authority with empathy, discipline with discretion, and public appearance with private negotiation, creating a resilient household capable of absorbing tension without compromising functionality or reputation. In conclusion, medieval castle life was a delicate interplay of human emotion, social hierarchy, and practical necessity. Conflict, jealousy, and tension were inevitable in a setting where personal desire, marital obligations, and social duty intersected. The management of these challenges relied on negotiation, communication, moral guidance, and strategic foresight. Within the castle, marital stability, household efficiency, and social reputation were maintained not only through authority and ritual but through the careful, ongoing navigation of human relationships, highlighting the complex, deeply human fabric of noble life. Life within a medieval castle was shaped not only by politics, marriage, and ceremony but also by the omnipresence of illness and the need for ongoing care. Health was a central concern, influencing daily routines, marital life, and household management. Nobles relied on a combination of practical remedies, traditional medical knowledge, religious faith, and domestic care to maintain well-being, treat sickness, and ensure the survival of family members. Illness could disrupt household function, strain marital relations, and even threaten the continuity of lineage, making the management of health a critical aspect of castle life. Medical knowledge in medieval Europe was limited but systematic. Physicians, barber surgeons, and herbalists applied the humoral theory, which posited that health depended on the balance of bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Illness was thought to result from imbalance, influenced by diet, environment, emotional state, and seasonal changes. Treatments included bloodletting, purging, herbal remedies, and topical applications. Nobles often relied on private medical practitioners when available, but knowledge of herbalism, poultices, and basic care was also cultivated within the household. The lady of the castle played a pivotal role in health management. She supervised food preparation, hygiene, and sanitation, recognizing that these factors influenced both well-being and social appearance. She also maintained a knowledge of medicinal herbs, poultices, and basic treatments, instructing attendants in their preparation and application. Her responsibility extended to newborns, children, and elderly family members, ensuring that care was consistent and effective. The household's stability often depended on her ability to prevent illness, manage minor ailments, and coordinate responses to more serious conditions. Daily routines were structured to support health. Meals were prepared with attention to nutrition, moderation, and seasonal availability. Clean water and adequate bedding were prioritized when possible, and ventilation and hygiene in living spaces were maintained to the extent that architecture and resources allowed. Personal hygiene practices, bathing, washing hands, laundering clothing, and maintaining clean chambers were encouraged, though frequency varied based on season, availability of water, and prevailing cultural attitudes toward cleanliness. Childbirth was one of the most critical and precarious aspects of castle life. Midwives and attendants provided care during labor, While the lady of the castle often oversaw preparations and assisted in ensuring safety, the mortality rate for mothers and infants was high, and careful management of diet, cleanliness, and ritual protection such as prayers, blessed oils, and protective charms was believed to improve outcomes. Successful childbirth was both a personal and social triumph, reinforcing the family's continuity and the stability of marital alliances. Illness could disrupt marital routines and household management. A sick spouse required attention, care, and emotional support, altering domestic hierarchies and daily responsibilities. Marital intimacy was often curtailed during periods of sickness, and household staff assumed additional duties to compensate. These periods of vulnerability highlighted the interdependence of family members and the household network, revealing both the fragility and resilience of life inside the castle. Mental health and emotional well-being were also recognized, though understood through a moral and humor lens. Melancholy, anxiety, or emotional distress were thought to affect the balance of humors and could influence physical health. Religious practice, companionship, music, and poetry were used to promote emotional equilibrium, reflecting an integrated approach to well-being that combined spiritual, emotional, and physical care. Husbands and wives often supported each other through illness, demonstrating that emotional intimacy and domestic partnership were essential to health management. The management of chronic conditions and aging also shaped household life. Elders required supervision, specialized diets, and attentive care, often relying heavily on the lady of the castle and her attendants. Planning for succession, distributing responsibilities, and ensuring the comfort of elderly family members were essential tasks that maintained the family's dignity, continuity, and emotional stability. The household's ability to care for vulnerable members reflected both practical competence and moral virtue. Religious rituals were closely intertwined with health practices. Prayers, blessings, and pilgrimages were common responses to serious illness, reinforcing the belief that divine intervention could support physical recovery. Reliance on saints, holy relics, and sacred water imbued medical care with spiritual significance, linking family health to faith, ritual, and moral responsibility. The integration of religion into healthcare also reinforced the moral and social framework of marital and familial duties. Servants and attendants were essential in health maintenance. They prepared remedies, monitored diets, assisted with bathing, and provided care for the sick, working under the guidance of the lady of the castle. Their vigilance and competence were critical, as timely interventions could prevent illness from spreading or worsening. The household network thus functioned as both a domestic and medical support system, underscoring the interdependence of labor, knowledge, and care. In conclusion, health and illness shaped every aspect of castle life, influencing marriage, household management, and emotional well-being. The interplay of medical knowledge, domestic care, religious practice, and emotional support created a comprehensive system for maintaining life within the castle walls. Husbands and wives collaborated in managing illness, nurturing children, and caring for aging relatives, demonstrating that love, duty, and practical responsibility were inseparable. In the medieval castle, the well-being of each individual was intimately connected to the household's organization, the skill of attendants, and the moral and spiritual framework guiding daily life. Religion permeated every aspect of life in a medieval castle, influencing marriage, household management, social interaction, and personal conduct. For noble families, spiritual practice was not merely a private matter but a framework for moral guidance, social legitimacy, and domestic harmony. Husbands, wives, children, and attendants alike participated in rituals, observed moral codes, and sought the counsel of clerics to maintain balance between duty, desire, and divine expectation. The integration of religion into castle life shaped values, relationships, and everyday routines in profound ways. Daily devotion structured the rhythm of life. Canonical hours, Prayer at sunrise and sunset, and regular attendance at Mass provided temporal anchors for the household. Nobles and servants alike were expected to observe these practices, embedding a sense of order, discipline, and reflection into each day. Prayer not only fostered spiritual awareness, but also reinforced moral accountability, reminding the family of obligations to God, kin, and society. Even routine activities, such as meals, were accompanied by grace, reinforcing the interconnectedness of faith and domestic life. Marriage itself was a sacrament, imbued with religious significance. The union of husband and wife was sanctified through ceremony, vows, and clerical oversight, affirming that marital duties were both social and spiritual. Religious instruction emphasized fidelity, respect, and moderation, teaching that love, intimacy, and domestic partnership were morally bound to spiritual principles. Couples were encouraged to cultivate virtues such as patience, humility, and charity, reinforcing the ethical foundation of the household. The lady of the castle often functioned as a moral guide within the household. She oversaw not only domestic order but also the ethical conduct of servants, children, and even her spouse in daily life. Her knowledge of scripture, prayer practices, and spiritual instruction allowed her to integrate moral guidance into education, conflict resolution, and family governance. Through her leadership, religion became a living, practical force shaping relationships, decision-making, and household management. Religious observances reinforced social hierarchy and marital authority. Lords presided over the household and estate with divine sanction, while wives maintained internal order and moral oversight. Clerics and chaplains acted as mediators, counselors, and instructors, offering guidance on marital disputes, household conduct, and ethical dilemmas. Spiritual oversight validated the distribution of power within the castle, connecting practical authority to moral responsibility and divine expectation. Feast days, holy days, and seasonal rituals were deeply intertwined with spiritual life. Saints' days, Easter, and Christmas were occasions for communal worship, family celebration, and reinforcement of social cohesion. Festivals often combined religious ceremony with feasting, music, and entertainment, merging spiritual devotion with the social and emotional life of the household. These occasions demonstrated the integration of moral instruction, communal identity, and familial unity. Education and upbringing were guided by religious principles. Children were instructed in prayer, scripture, and moral reasoning, while also learning practical skills, manners, and social responsibility. Religious tales, saints' lives, and allegorical stories taught virtue, obedience, and ethical discernment, shaping the moral development of the next generation. Instruction reinforced both the family's spiritual values and the skills necessary for navigating complex social hierarchies. Clerics played an active role in marital guidance. Confession, counsel, and instruction addressed matters of fidelity, sexual conduct, and emotional tension, integrating spiritual wisdom with practical concerns. Religious oversight provided a framework for resolving disputes, moderating jealousy, and reinforcing ethical behavior, linking the moral health of the household to the spiritual well-being of its members. The integration of faith into household management extended to charitable and social duties. Nobles were expected to support the poor, maintain chapels, and contribute to ecclesiastical institutions. Such actions reinforced moral authority, demonstrated piety, and strengthened social bonds beyond the castle walls. The moral and spiritual conduct of the household was as important as its political or economic standing, reflecting the holistic worldview in which faith, virtue, and social responsibility were inseparable. Emotional life and spiritual practice were interconnected. Prayer, reflection, and devotional practice provided comfort in times of stress, illness, or conflict. Shared religious observance between spouses and family members strengthened bonds, created mutual accountability, and reinforced shared values. Spiritual life was thus both a personal and communal endeavor, shaping character, guiding conduct, and sustaining the household's cohesion. In conclusion, religion and moral guidance were central to medieval castle life, influencing marriage, domestic management, and social interaction. Spiritual practice structured daily routines, reinforced authority, and provided ethical frameworks for interpersonal relationships. Husbands and wives, guided by clergy and religious tradition, cultivated virtue, fidelity, and care within the household. The integration of faith with domestic, social, and emotional life ensured that the castle was not merely a fortress or residence, but a morally and spiritually organized community, where divine guidance intersected with human duty, affection, and partnership. Life inside a medieval castle was not confined to stone walls. The social, political, and familial networks of the nobility often required travel, negotiation, and interaction with other households. These experiences influenced marital life, household management, and personal relationships, blending duty, diplomacy, and social engagement. Travel, whether for court attendance, alliance building, or military campaigns, exposed noble families to external pressures and opportunities, shaping both private and public dimensions of castle life. Husbands frequently traveled for political, military, or administrative purposes. Attendance at royal courts, negotiation of alliances, or participation in campaigns required extended absences from home. These journeys tested marital bonds, as spouses were separated for weeks or months. Letters, messages, and trusted attendants maintained communication, allowing couples to negotiate household decisions, express concern, and sustain emotional connection despite physical distance. Travel reinforced the interdependence of domestic and external responsibilities. Wives, meanwhile, managed the household in their husband's absence. Their authority over domestic operations, staff, children, and social duties was amplified, highlighting the dual nature of marital partnership. They coordinated provisioning, supervised construction or maintenance projects, and ensured that social obligations such as hosting visitors or attending religious observances were fulfilled. Successful management reinforced both personal authority and the household's reputation, demonstrating competence and leadership in the lord's absence. Visiting other households provided opportunities for diplomacy, alliance building, and social negotiation. Noble families exchanged visits to discuss marriage prospects, secure political alliances, or attend feasts and ceremonies. These interactions required careful attention to protocol, etiquette, and presentation. Marital collaboration was essential, as couples represented their household collectively, demonstrating unity, virtue, and sophistication to allies and peers. Proper conduct during these visits could enhance prestige, strengthen alliances, and consolidate social influence. Travel also exposed couples to new cultural practices, fashions, and ideas. Exposure to different customs, courtly rituals, and regional etiquette influenced personal taste, household organization, and social behavior. Nobles could adopt innovative practices, refine their ceremonial rituals, or adjust household management strategies based on experiences outside the castle. Travel thus served as a conduit for cultural exchange, informing both marital life and domestic practice. Diplomatic missions required careful planning and coordination. Hosts and guests negotiated seating, gift exchange, and ceremonial protocol to convey respect and authority. Husbands and wives were active participants in these negotiations, ensuring that gestures, words, and actions reinforced social hierarchy, alliance obligations, and personal reputation. Marital collaboration in diplomacy was essential, as missteps could damage relationships, provoke offense, or undermine household authority. Extended absences created both challenges and opportunities for intimacy. Husbands' travel demanded trust, emotional restraint, and strategic communication. Wives balanced autonomy with loyalty, managing the household while maintaining marital fidelity and social propriety. Letters, gifts, and the careful observation of etiquette facilitated ongoing connection, demonstrating that distance did not preclude emotional engagement or household coordination. Children and attendants were also affected by travel and diplomatic activity. Their routines could be disrupted by absences or visits, requiring flexible household management and careful planning. Tutors, stewards, and senior attendants assumed additional responsibilities, ensuring continuity in education, discipline, and domestic operations. This coordination strengthened the household network, reinforcing both practical skill and loyalty among staff. Religion intersected with travel and diplomacy, shaping conduct and providing guidance. Clerics often advised travelers on moral obligations, spiritual observance, and ethical interaction with peers. Religious practice provided reassurance during uncertainty, illness, or negotiation, reinforcing moral and spiritual frameworks amid the logistical and social challenges of mobility. Pilgrimages, holy visits, and ceremonial blessings complemented political travel, blending spiritual duty with social engagement. Travel and interaction with other households also exposed couples to potential conflict, rivalry, and jealousy. Competition for prestige, favor, or advantageous alliances could create tension, requiring careful navigation, discretion, and diplomacy. Successful couples employed tact, observation, and strategic planning to maintain unity, represent their household effectively, and cultivate alliances without compromising internal harmony. In conclusion, travel and interactions with other households were integral to the life of the medieval castle, influencing marital dynamics, household management, and social positioning. Noble couples collaborated in representing their family, managing domestic responsibilities, and sustaining emotional bonds across distances. These experiences reinforced interdependence, cultivated social skill, and provided exposure to cultural, political, and spiritual practices beyond the castle walls. Travel was not merely movement. It was an extension of marital partnership, household authority, and social engagement, highlighting the interconnectedness of private and public life in the medieval noble world. Life within a medieval castle was demanding, structured by duty, hierarchy, and ritual, yet it also allowed space for leisure, entertainment, and intellectual cultivation. Noble families engaged in activities that enriched their minds, sharpened social skills, and provided emotional respite. Entertainment and intellectual pursuits were not frivolous. They reinforced social hierarchy, demonstrated refinement, and nurtured bonds within the household. Both husbands and wives participated in orchestrating and enjoying these activities, making leisure an integral aspect of marital and family life. Music was central to castle entertainment. Minstrels, troubadours, and household musicians performed songs ranging from courtly love ballads to heroic epics. Music accompanied feasts, celebrations, and private gatherings, setting mood, demonstrating taste, and fostering shared enjoyment. Both men and women were often trained to play instruments or sing, reflecting the importance of cultural literacy and social refinement. Musical performance cultivated creativity, emotional expression, and a sense of shared experience within the household. Games and sports provided both recreation and skill development. Nobles engaged in jousting, archery, hunting, and fencing, which reinforced martial prowess, physical coordination, and competitive spirit. Indoor games, such as chess, dice, or board games, exercised strategic thinking, patience, and social etiquette. These activities were not only leisurely but educational, preparing young nobles for leadership, negotiation, and tactical decision-making. Participation also strengthened social bonds, offering structured spaces for camaraderie, rivalry, and mentorship. Hunting was particularly significant, blending leisure, skill, and social signaling. Organized hunts required coordination among staff, expertise in animal tracking, and mastery of weapons. They demonstrated nobility's command over both people and landscape, while providing opportunities for courtship, mentorship, and recreation. Hunting parties were often social events, fostering camaraderie, negotiation, and enjoyment, while reinforcing hierarchical relationships between hosts, guests, and attendants. Literature and intellectual pursuits enriched household life. Noble women and men engaged in reading, storytelling, and writing, exploring poetry, religious texts, historical chronicles, and philosophical works. Libraries, manuscript collections, and scriptoriums within castles provided resources for education, contemplation, and entertainment. Reading aloud and storytelling strengthened bonds between family members, nurtured imagination, and offered moral and intellectual instruction, blending pleasure with edification. Art and decorative pursuits were also part of leisure and social expression. Painting, embroidery, illumination, and tapestry work allowed household members, particularly women, to cultivate skill, taste, and aesthetic judgment. These artistic activities reinforced cultural refinement, contributed to household decoration, and symbolically represented familial status, wealth, and virtue. They offered both creative outlet and practical utility, intertwining personal development with household presentation. Religious contemplation and devotional exercises were another form of leisure. Meditation, prayer, and reflection on Scripture offered solace, ethical guidance, and intellectual engagement. Holy readings and spiritual discussions provided opportunities for dialogue, moral instruction, and emotional enrichment. Leisure activities and spiritual practice were complementary, fostering balanced development of body, mind, and spirit. Hospitality and social visits were important recreational and educational forms. Hosting guests, attending feasts, or participating in tournaments offered opportunities for observation, social learning, and refinement of etiquette. Interaction with peers cultivated alliances, expanded knowledge, and allowed families to demonstrate sophistication, taste, and cultural competence. These experiences reinforced the social identity of the household while enriching marital and family bonds through shared participation. Domestic and creative entertainment also played a role in marital relationships. Couples often shared music, reading, or games, fostering companionship, mutual appreciation, and emotional connection. Intellectual collaboration, such as discussing poetry, moral dilemmas, or historical events, strengthened partnership, deepened conversation, and provided shared joy. Leisure thus became a medium for nurturing intimacy, reinforcing partnership, and expressing affection within the boundaries of propriety. Servants and attendants facilitated entertainment and leisure. They prepared materials, managed spaces, and coordinated performances, enabling the household to engage fully in cultural, intellectual, and recreational activities. Their labor ensured that leisure was organized, orderly, and enjoyable, highlighting the interdependence of domestic service and aristocratic refinement. In conclusion, entertainment and intellectual pursuits were essential components of life in the medieval castle. Music, games, hunting, literature, art, and spiritual exercises nurtured skill, imagination, and social competence while strengthening household cohesion and marital partnership. Leisure activities provided structured opportunities for emotional expression, intellectual development, and cultural refinement. Within the castle, these pursuits were integral to the cultivation of noble identity, the reinforcement of social hierarchy, and the enrichment of personal and marital life, demonstrating that intellectual and recreational engagement were inseparable from duty, virtue, and domestic management. Food and meals were central to life within a medieval castle, functioning as both a practical necessity and a symbolic expression of wealth, status, and social cohesion. The preparation, presentation, and consumption of food involved elaborate planning, household coordination, and attention to etiquette, making meals a key aspect of domestic, marital, and social life. Beyond sustenance, meals reinforced hierarchy, nurtured relationships, and provided opportunities for education, entertainment, and ceremonial expression. The management of the castle kitchen was a complex operation, often overseen by a steward or the lady of the castle. The kitchen coordinated with storage rooms, pantries, and cellars to ensure a steady supply of ingredients, including grains, meats, dairy, fruits, vegetables, and spices. Large-scale feasts required meticulous organization, with teams of cooks, assistants, and servers preparing multiple dishes simultaneously. The logistical demands of feeding the household guests and retainers demanded efficiency, foresight, and skilled labor, highlighting the castle's dependence on its domestic network. Meals followed social and ceremonial protocols. Seating arrangements, serving order, and table presentation reflected hierarchy and reinforced authority. The lord and lady presided over the table, with family members, guests, and attendants positioned according to rank. The manner of serving, use of utensils, and observance of grace or other rituals demonstrated propriety, etiquette, and cultural refinement. Observing and adhering to these conventions was a form of social education, particularly for children and young household members. Food choices conveyed status, taste, and regional identity. Wealthy households enjoyed meats such as venison, boar, beef, and poultry, often spiced or elaborately prepared. Fish was essential on religious fasting days, while grains, legumes, and vegetables formed the foundation of daily sustenance. Spices imported from distant lands signaled sophistication and wealth. Meals thus functioned as a form of social display, communicating the household's connections, resources, and cultural sensibility. The lady of the castle played a critical role in food preparation and household provisioning. She supervised cooks, instructed servants, and ensured that food quality, hygiene, and presentation met both practical and aesthetic standards. She also balanced dietary considerations for family members, guests, and retainers, reflecting an understanding of nutrition, health, and social expectation. Through these responsibilities, she exercised both authority and creativity, blending domestic management with social performance. Feasting was both celebratory and symbolic. Banquets marked religious holidays, marriages, births, victories, and other significant events. Elaborate multi-course meals showcased culinary skill, artistry, and wealth. Entertainment, including music, poetry, and pageantry, often accompanied feasts, creating immersive experiences that reinforced social cohesion and marital prestige. Such occasions provided opportunities for husbands and wives to demonstrate hospitality, cultural literacy, and social refinement, enhancing the household's reputation. Everyday meals were equally significant in shaping household life. They structured daily routines, promoted shared interaction, and reinforced familial bonds. Family members often ate together, providing opportunities for conversation, instruction, and emotional connection. Servants assisted in meal preparation and service, creating a rhythm of labor and domestic cooperation that integrated practical necessity with relational and social function. Food was also imbued with moral and religious significance. Certain ingredients or meal structures were dictated by fasting feast days or spiritual guidance. Observing these dietary rules reinforced obedience, piety, and communal identity. Meals could thus serve as instruments for spiritual cultivation, moral instruction, and reinforcement of household order. Children were educated through participation in meals, observation of etiquette, assistance in minor service tasks, and participation in communal dining provided lessons in hierarchy, propriety, and social skills. These experiences prepared them for their future roles, instilling knowledge of domestic responsibility, social expectation, and ceremonial participation. Food and mealtime dynamics also affected marital life. Couples shared meals as an intimate, routine form of interaction, coordinating preferences, discussing household affairs, and nurturing companionship. Collaborative planning and participation in meals strengthened partnership, allowing both husband and wife to engage in domestic leadership, hospitality, and shared responsibility. Meals were not merely functional but an arena in which marital cooperation, household authority, and social expression intersected. In conclusion, food and cooking were central to the social, domestic, and emotional life of the medieval castle. From large feasts to daily meals, the preparation and consumption of food reinforced hierarchy, showcased wealth, nurtured relationships, and provided moral and cultural education. Husbands, wives, children, and attendants collaborated to ensure both sustenance and social display, intertwining practical necessity with ceremonial, emotional, and intellectual engagement. Meals were a microcosm of castle life, reflecting the interdependence of family, household labor, and social aspiration within a structured yet dynamic environment. Education and training were central to the functioning of a medieval castle, ensuring the continuity of family status, household management, and social influence. Children of noble families were groomed from a young age to fulfill their future roles, with education encompassing martial, domestic, intellectual, and moral instruction. Within the castle walls, both boys and girls received tailored guidance that reinforced gender roles, cultivated competence, and prepared them to navigate the complex networks of marriage, alliances, and service that defined medieval aristocratic life. Boys were trained primarily in martial and administrative skills, preparing them to inherit estates, lead households, and fulfill obligations to their lord or the crown. From early childhood, they learned horsemanship, archery, swordplay, and other combat techniques. These physical exercises not only developed strength and dexterity but also instilled discipline, courage, and strategic thinking. Boys were often assigned mentors or tutors, including experienced knights, household officers, or visiting nobles who guided them in both practical skill and social conduct. Intellectual education for boys included instruction in literacy, numeracy, law, and history. Knowledge of reading and writing, often in Latin, enabled them to manage estates, correspond with allies, and engage in political or legal matters. Study of historical chronicles, moral treatises, and classical texts provided insight into governance, ethics, and human behavior. This combination of intellectual and practical training ensured that young men were prepared for leadership and responsible management of both people and property. Girls' education focused on domestic, social, and cultural skills, preparing them to oversee households, manage staff, and participate in courtly life. Instruction included sewing, embroidery, spinning, and other crafts essential for household productivity and display of refinement. Girls were also trained in music, dance, and etiquette, enabling them to represent their family in social and ceremonial contexts. Knowledge of religious practice, moral instruction, and basic literacy equipped them to instruct children, advise spouses, and engage meaningfully in household decision-making. Both boys and girls received moral and religious instruction. Clerics, chaplains, or educated household members guided children in prayer, virtue, and ethical conduct. Lessons in honesty, loyalty, temperance, and charity emphasized the moral responsibilities associated with their future social and familial roles. Stories of saints, heroic figures, and moral allegories were used to illustrate principles, blending entertainment with instruction and reinforcing the integration of ethical and practical knowledge. Household chores and supervised labor formed a crucial component of training. Boys might assist with minor estate management or observe staff and administrative duties, while girls learned to coordinate household operations, manage servants, and oversee food preparation. These experiences reinforced responsibility, attention to detail, and practical competence, enabling children to contribute meaningfully to the household while gaining essential skills for adulthood. Social education was equally important. Children were taught etiquette, negotiation, and communication, observing adults in feasts, ceremonies, and interactions with guests. These lessons fostered awareness of hierarchy, diplomacy, and personal conduct, ensuring that they could navigate complex social environments with grace and intelligence. Participation in games, music, and dance reinforced social skill, cooperation, and camaraderie, blending pleasure with learning. Mentorship and observation were key pedagogical tools. Children learned by watching adults, imitating behavior, and receiving guidance. Older siblings, attendants, and visiting tutors provided instruction and correction, modeling skills, manners, and moral conduct. This immersive approach allowed learning to be contextual, experiential, and continuous, integrating intellectual, practical, and emotional growth. Education also included preparation for marriage and family life. Boys were taught negotiation, alliance building, and management of domestic affairs, while girls were instructed in the responsibilities of a wife, mother, and household manager. These lessons reinforced the interdependence of marital and domestic competence, ensuring that children were prepared for the social and emotional challenges of adult life. In conclusion, the education and training of children within the medieval castle were comprehensive, structured, and purpose-driven. Boys and girls acquired martial, domestic, intellectual, and moral skills, preparing them for leadership, household management, and social integration. Guided by tutors, mentors, and family members, children learned through observation, practice, and instruction, blending education with participation in everyday life. This cultivation of skill, character, and social competence ensured that the next generation could sustain the family's status, uphold household responsibilities, and navigate the complex social, political, and emotional realities of medieval noble life. Life within a medieval castle was punctuated by ceremonies and rites of passage, which structured human experience, reinforced social hierarchy, and strengthened familial and marital bonds. These events marked critical transitions from birth to adulthood, marriage, and death, and were imbued with ritual, symbolism, and communal significance. Within the castle, ceremonies provided opportunities for instruction, display, and emotional connection, making them central to both private life and public identity. Birth was celebrated with ritual and careful preparation. The arrival of a child, especially an heir, was of immense social and strategic importance. Midwives, attendants, and the lady of the castle oversaw labor and immediate care, while the household prepared for celebrations and symbolic acts. Baptism, often conducted shortly after birth, integrated the newborn into both the Christian community and the household's social network. Gifts, prayers, and communal feasting reinforced the significance of new life, signaling both familial joy and social continuity. Childhood was marked by incremental rites of passage that reflected growth, skill acquisition, and moral development. Boys' early exposure to weapons, horsemanship, and strategy games indicated preparation for eventual knighthood or estate management. Girls' mastery of household tasks, embroidery, music, and etiquette signaled readiness for future responsibilities as wives and managers of domestic affairs. These stages were often celebrated with small ceremonies, recognition from parents or mentors, and reinforcement of ethical and social expectations. Coming-of-age ceremonies formalized the transition to adolescence and early adulthood. For boys, knighthood or formal training in arms, sometimes accompanied by symbolic rituals, such as the accolade or ceremonial vigil, marked their readiness to participate fully in martial and social life. For girls, participation in courtly events, presentation at feasts, or symbolic demonstrations of skill in household management signaled maturity and preparedness for marriage. These rites reinforced both personal identity and social expectation, embedding the individual within the broader framework of the noble household. Marriage ceremonies were among the most elaborate and socially significant rites in castle life. Vows, religious observances, and ceremonial exchange of gifts formalized the union, while feasts and celebrations demonstrated wealth, refinement, and social network. These ceremonies reinforced familial alliances, displayed the household's prestige, and provided structured occasions for emotional expression, including joy, admiration, and solidarity. Wedding festivities often lasted several days, combining ritual, entertainment, and social negotiation. Coming of age and marriage rites were closely intertwined with education and mentorship. Elders, clerics, and household officers provided instruction, supervision, and support, ensuring that participants understood both the symbolic and practical aspects of the ceremonies. These experiences reinforced moral guidance, social hierarchy, and household cohesion, integrating personal development with communal life. Death and memorial ceremonies were equally structured and significant. The passing of a family member or important retainer prompted mourning, ritual observance, and reflection on social and spiritual bonds. Funeral rites included prayers, symbolic gestures, and communal participation, reinforcing moral and religious norms while providing closure and affirmation of continuity. These rites underscored the castle's role as both a physical and symbolic center of life, connecting the living and the dead through ritual observance and social memory. Seasonal festivals and religious observances also functioned as recurring rites of passage. Holy days, saints' feasts, and harvest celebrations marked the passage of time and the cycles of life, providing opportunities for communal engagement, moral reflection, and reinforcement of social cohesion. Participation in these rituals educated children, reinforced household hierarchy, and integrated spiritual observance with daily life. Ceremonies were rich in symbolism, costume, and ritualized behavior. Heraldic displays, religious iconography, musical accompaniment, and theatrical performance communicated social identity, virtue, and allegiance. These elements enhanced the aesthetic and emotional impact of each event, teaching participants about propriety, honor, and moral responsibility while creating shared experiences that strengthened household unity. The role of attendants and household staff in ceremonies was crucial. They organized logistics, prepared spaces, assisted participants, and ensured that rituals proceeded smoothly. Their labor enabled nobles to perform public and private roles with dignity, reinforcing hierarchy, propriety, and cohesion while also providing opportunities for skill development, observation, and participation in the household's social life. In conclusion, ceremonies and rites of passage were central to life in the medieval castle, structuring personal development, social hierarchy, and communal identity. Births, childhood milestones, coming-of-age rituals, marriages, seasonal festivals, and funerals created a framework through which individuals learned, bonded, and expressed emotion. These structured occasions integrated moral guidance, social expectation, and practical instruction, demonstrating that the castle functioned not only as a residence and fortress, but as a stage for the ritualized passage of life, where personal growth, familial bonds, and social cohesion were celebrated and reinforced. Life within a medieval castle did not remain static as children grew up, and household routines became established. Marital and familial relationships evolved over decades, shaped by the passage of time, the accumulation of responsibilities, and shared experiences. Love, loyalty, and partnership in later life were influenced by both personal bonds and social expectation, blending emotional intimacy, practical cooperation, and strategic awareness. In many ways, the entrance of marriage was as much a product of negotiation, mutual respect, and shared duty as of romantic affection. Couples who had spent years managing households, raising children, and engaging in public life often developed deep interdependence. They relied on one another for advice, support, and companionship, sharing the burdens of estate management, social obligations, and ceremonial duties. Long-term collaboration fostered understanding of temperament, skill, and preference, allowing partners to coordinate effectively in decision-making and daily routines. Emotional bonds were reinforced through shared memory, mutual respect, and the recognition of each other's contributions to the household. Love in later life took multiple forms. Romantic passion often matured into companionship characterized by mutual regard, loyalty, and shared purpose. Physical affection could continue, though it was frequently tempered by social expectations, health considerations, and the rhythms of daily duty. Marital intimacy was embedded within a broader framework of partnership, trust, and practical cooperation, highlighting the interwoven nature of emotion and responsibility in sustaining household harmony. Loyalty was central to the longevity of marital and household life. Couples depended on mutual fidelity, adherence to social and religious norms, and respect for one another's authority. Household staff and children observed these dynamics closely, learning from the example of their elders. Consistent demonstration of loyalty reinforced the household's moral and social order, setting a precedent for younger generations while stabilizing domestic operations. The management of aging, illness, and vulnerability became increasingly important in later life. Both husbands and wives faced physical limitations, chronic ailments, or the gradual loss of stamina. Shared responsibility in attending to health, supervising staff, and ensuring continuity of household operations required empathy, cooperation, and adaptive planning. Partnership was expressed not only through collaboration in duties but also through mutual support in moments of personal difficulty. Financial and strategic collaboration also continued to shape long-term partnership. Estate management, allocation of resources, and planning for succession were ongoing responsibilities. Couples negotiated land use, arranged marriages for children, and maintained alliances with neighboring households. Their combined wisdom, accumulated over decades, enabled effective governance, dispute resolution, and social diplomacy, ensuring the household's stability and legacy. Emotional life remained intertwined with spiritual practice. Prayer, reflection, and shared religious observances offered comfort, guidance, and moral reinforcement. Couples found solace in faith during illness, loss, or personal challenge, and religious ritual provided a framework for understanding and enduring the inevitable hardships of life. Spiritual partnership reinforced marital cohesion, offering shared meaning and moral structure to the household. The household itself became a locus of intergenerational continuity. Children and grandchildren observed the marriage of elders as a model of cooperation, loyalty, and moral conduct. Interactions with staff, dependents, and visiting nobles reflected the influence of mature partnership, demonstrating how enduring relationships could stabilize both domestic and social structures. Long-term marital harmony was not merely personal. It shaped the perception, reputation, and functioning of the castle as a social and political entity. Conflict and tension did not disappear with age, but experience often enhanced resolution skills. Couples learned to negotiate disagreements with tact, empathy, and strategic insight, balancing emotional response with practical necessity. Mutual understanding, shared responsibility, and recognition of each other's strengths allowed for smoother management of challenges, whether arising from family disputes, household operations, or external pressures. In conclusion, later life love, loyalty, and partnership within the castle were the culmination of years of shared experience, responsibility, and emotional growth. Couples combined emotional intimacy with practical cooperation, strategic insight, and moral guidance, creating a resilient household capable of enduring challenges and sustaining legacy. Marriage evolved into a deep partnership in which personal bonds, social duty, and domestic authority were inseparably intertwined. In the medieval castle, enduring love was expressed not only through passion but through collaboration, fidelity, and the shared labor of sustaining family, home, and social order. As life in a medieval castle reached its later stages, The focus shifted from daily management and immediate concerns to questions of legacy, memory, and long-term impact. Noble couples, having navigated marriage, family, social obligations, and the complexities of household management, were acutely aware that their actions, decisions, and relationships would resonate beyond their own lifetimes. Legacy encompassed material inheritance, the moral and social education of children, the cohesion of the household, and the enduring reputation of the family in both local and broader social networks. Material legacy was carefully structured. Estates, lands, and movable property were allocated according to legal frameworks, social expectation, and familial strategy. Wills, contracts, and formal agreements ensured that wealth and authority passed smoothly to heirs, while minimizing disputes and preserving alliances. Dowries, jointures, and endowments were meticulously documented, reflecting both financial acumen and social foresight. In this way, the castle itself, the buildings, contents, and lands, was both a home and a tangible symbol of continuity. The moral and educational legacy of the family was equally significant. Children and grandchildren absorbed lessons in governance, etiquette, spiritual practice, and domestic management. Observation of parental behavior, participation in household routines, and engagement in social and ceremonial life imparted knowledge that would guide the next generation. The values instilled, honor, loyalty, prudence, and moral responsibility, formed a lasting framework for social and familial interaction, ensuring that the household's ethos persisted over time. Marital legacy was expressed through the demonstration of enduring partnership and effective collaboration. The ways in which couples navigated conflict, shared responsibility, and nurtured emotional bonds provided a model for younger family members. Long-term marriages reinforced the ideals of fidelity, respect, and cooperative governance, highlighting that love, duty, and practical management were inseparable in the maintenance of household and family stability. The example set by a mature couple could influence not only immediate descendants, but also extended social networks, reinforcing norms of behavior and expectation. Religious and spiritual legacy was a central concern. Nobles often established chapels, endowed religious institutions, or made arrangements for prayers and masses to be conducted for their souls and those of family members. These acts ensured continuity of spiritual care, reinforced piety as a household value, and contributed to the moral standing of the family within broader society. The integration of faith into legacy planning highlighted the inseparability of temporal and spiritual concerns in medieval noble life. The physical structure of the castle itself served as a lasting testament to family legacy. Additions, renovations, and decorative works reflected both wealth and aesthetic sensibility, while functional design maintained the household's operational effectiveness. Architecture, furnishings, and art conveyed messages of status, refinement, and continuity, signaling to visitors, allies, and successors the enduring strength and identity of the family. Through these material symbols, the life of the household was inscribed into the landscape, offering tangible evidence of achievement, taste, and stability. Community and social networks were also central to legacy. Alliances formed through marriage, diplomacy, and patronage continued to influence political, economic, and social dynamics beyond a couple's lifespan. Maintaining strong relationships with neighboring households, vassals, and ecclesiastical authorities ensured that the family's influence endured, and that the household remained a respected node in the broader web of medieval society. The social and political dimension of legacy extended the impact of personal and marital effort into wider contexts. Reflection on life, love, and family was a personal aspect of legacy. Elders in the castle often engaged in contemplation of achievements, failures, and the broader arc of experience. Through storytelling, advice, and the sharing of wisdom, they transmitted knowledge and insight, offering guidance to younger generations. Reflection reinforced moral, practical and emotional continuity, linking the past, present, and future in a meaningful narrative of household life. Even death was framed as part of legacy. Careful planning of burial tombs and commemorative rituals reinforced both familial and spiritual continuity. Funerary monuments, inscriptions, and memorial practices served as public affirmations of the family's place in history, ensuring that reputation, virtue, and accomplishment were remembered by both descendants and the broader community. The rituals surrounding death intertwined remembrance, reverence, and social symbolism, consolidating the household's enduring impact. In conclusion, the long-term impact of life in the medieval castle was a complex tapestry of material, social, moral, and spiritual legacies. Marital partnership, household management, education, and social engagement converged to create enduring influence that extended beyond individual lifetimes. The castle was both a home and a stage for cultivating skills, virtues, and relationships that would shape future generations. Legacy encompassed property, reputation, moral guidance, and spiritual care, reflecting the holistic understanding of life, duty, and continuity that defined the medieval noble household. Through careful planning, sustained partnership, and the cultivation of knowledge, virtue, and social ties, the inhabitants of the castle ensured that their influence, values, and accomplishments would resonate long after their own presence had passed.